My name is Lina Moreno, and I turned 28 the night my aunt pushed an eviction notice under my bedroom door and called it mercy. It was 9:14 p.m. on a Tuesday. The paper slid across the floor like a snake and stopped at my toes. I had the lamp on low, the bulb buzzed the way it did when it wanted replacing. I could smell cinnamon glaze drying on the counter from the last batch of pastry. My grandmother had iced before she died, and I could hear my cousin's truck idle outside, headlights washing the porch into a harsh white stage. "You have 21 days, Aunt Marla said through the wood. Her voice didn't tremble. "We can make it easy, but we won't make it late." I didn't say a word. There were 3 staples in the top left corner. I counted them. 1, 2, 3. I decided to make them regret the last one. I'll tell you why that paper came. What I found tucked under a floorboard nobody remembered, and how a brass key no bigger than my thumb changed the end of our story. But first, I need you to stand with me in the place they said I didn't belong. Hearth Lake sits far north in New York, where the highway narrows and hills learn to breathe fog. Our family's orchard, Merino Press and Cedar, has been here since the 1940s, when my great-grandfather planted a row of wine saps along the shore. My grandmother, Ruth, ran the press. She could tell the sugar content of a bushel by lifting it. She was Grace in denim. She raised me after my mother went looking for something she never found and didn't return for. We made cider in October and cinnamon buns in December and paid people in honesty when the cash ran short. Or we did, until my grandmother's lungs stiffened and the cough took her, and the press became a mouth open for anyone who wanted to feed it lies. "You don't know how to run this place," Marla told me at the memorial, without looking me in the eyes. "You're soft. Ruth did the hard things so you'd never have to. That ends now." She wore my grandmother's red scarf like it belonged to her. People cried in the driveway and warmed their hands around paper cups of cider. I'd brewed at dawn. I held out a thermos to my aunt. She shook her head. I didn't have a chair at the kitchen table that day. That was the first quiet exile. The second was genius in its pettiness. A week later, the company email changed. My login failed. My desk key didn't work. The same employees I'd hired looked at their shoes. My cousin, Shane, folded his arms and pretended it wasn't his idea. When I asked Marla what was happening, she said, "I've restructured the LLC to protect us. It's for the best. You're still family." Family. She said it like an alibi. I took the eviction notice upstairs and set it under the brass frame with my grandmother's photograph. She was 22 in it, hair in a scarf. Smile crooked like she didn't want the camera to know how much she hoped the future would be kind. I pressed my finger to the glass until I could feel my pulse in it. "I won't let them erase you," I said. "I won't let them erase me." The first clue wasn't a document. It was a voicemail. My phone had a message from an unknown number, timestamped 2 days after Grandma died. I almost deleted it. The icon hung there like a mosquito I didn't want to swat. I pressed play. "Lina," my grandmother's voice said, breath skimming like she'd been trying not to cough. "If Marla brings up the bluebirds, you already know what that means. North side, 3rd board from the post. Don't argue with wood. It always tells the truth. I love you. Bluebirds. 3rd board from the post." I sat very still. Outside, the truck engine cut. My aunt's footsteps went down the stairs. The house released its breath. I didn't sleep. At dawn, I put on jeans and a sweater that could get dirty, tucked my hair into a beanie, and went out to the press. The morning tasted like iron and frost. The press stood there under the light like a stubborn old animal. Bolts and beams. The wooden platform my great-grandfather had oiled and cursed and brought back to life 100 times. North side. 3rd board from the post. I counted floorboards from the corner where we stacked crates in October. On the 3rd, I pressed my palm flat. A splinter kissed my skin. "Wood tells the truth," Grandma had said. I went to the tool room, took a flathead screwdriver, and pried up the nails. Under the board was a hollow no bigger than a shoebox. In it, a blue spiral notebook, a brass key on a twine loop, and a single playing card, the Queen of Hearts, with Ruth's handwriting along the edge. "You don't win by bluffing. You win by making them show their hands." I took the notebook and key back inside and shut the door. The house held cold like a mood. I sat at the kitchen table and opened the notebook. Ruth's neat, practical script walked across the lines. It wasn't a diary. It was a ledger's shadow. She listed every time Marla helped with a vendor payment and it arrived. Short. Dates, amounts, who picked up and who signed. Notes like talk to Mr. Hightower at County Re, Grant and Shane promised. Insurance adjuster dinner. Why? Then a page that read, Ciderfest Grant. 2021, application signed Lina M., but not by my pen. Underneath, a photocopy of the grant signature page taped in. My name rolled onto it like someone set a hot iron and melted me into the paper. My throat went tight. I remembered that day in 2021. I'd been in bed with a fever. Aunt Marla brought me soup and patted my hair. Sleep, she'd said. We'll handle the paperwork. I set the notebook down. My hands were shaking. I took the brass key and turned it over in my palm. On one side, the number 109 was stamped, on the other. The name of a bank 3 towns over that my grandmother used when she didn't trust ours. I didn't go to work. The word work felt like a joke anyway. I drove to the bank in Caldwell, the heater hissing. The hills leaning in like someone wanted to hear what I was about to say. The woman at the safe deposit counter had pearl earrings and a patience I wanted. To borrow. I set the key on the desk. My grandmother was Ruth Moreno, I said. I think she left me this. The woman checked a list, asked me for ID. And then for the other half of the key. Hers. You'll need to sign, she said. We have a sealed envelope here in her name with a note that says, deliver to Lina on her 28th birthday or earlier if Marla touches the house. The woman read the note twice. Is Marla touching the house? I lifted my eyes. Hard. We went into a small room with a table that probably had heard 1,000 family. Plots whisper themselves out loud. The woman slid a long, shallow box onto the table, unlocked it, and left me alone. Inside was a letter in my grandmother's careful cursive and a thin stack of documents bound with a faded purple ribbon. I opened the letter first. Baby, she wrote, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the luxury of telling you face to face. Your mother's sister is more stubborn than any of us. She thinks fear is the same thing as love. It isn't. The press is not just a machine. It's a right. The spring behind the north fence feeds everyone's water that goes through a pipe we built in 58. When your grandfather put that pipe in, he held the water rights under his own name because banks wouldn't let a woman own them. He moved them to me when the law caught up. I moved them to you when you could ride a bike without falling. There's a deed in this box. And a codicil the county clerk will file if you bring it in with ID. If they threaten you, call Irene at the courthouse. She's retired now, but she owes me a pie. Do not sell the spring. Do not let them bottle it for a quick buck. Make it yours and make them look you in the eye when they say otherwise. The deed named me as sole owner of the spring and the small parcel around it. My grandmother had signed it before a judge in town who died last winter. My hands went sweaty. If the spring was mine, the orchard needed me more than I needed it. Which explained the eviction. I took pictures of everything and then put the documents back in the box like I was tucking in a child. I left the bank feeling like the sidewalk was a rope bridge. Cars went by, normal as rain. Back at the house, something had changed. The front door was open. From the hall, I could hear my aunt's voice, bright and false. She was giving a tour, and the original beams, she was saying to someone, we'll keep as is for authenticity. The studio will go here. Studio? I stepped into the doorway. Marla turned. The woman beside her wore a scarf like a puddle of silk and sunglasses even, though the nearest sunbeam was in another county. This was the event planner who did Ciderfest every year. She looked me up and down as if I were an uncooperative piece of furniture. You can wait for me in the kitchen, my aunt said. She had the red scarf on again, and a lipstick my grandmother would have called city. I live here, I said. At least for 20 days. I kept my voice even. But you can wait in the kitchen if you like. The planner gave a tiny laugh. Family drama, she said, and sipped from a bottle of branded water she'd pulled from her bag. The logo was the for-profit company that had offered to partner with us last fall by leasing our spring to sell flavored seltzer in variant shades of greed. We're pivoting, my aunt said. Wellness studio. Bridal portraits. Cider's a seasonal item, Brides are forever. I stood there and tried to keep my face calm as a lake before a storm. I thought of the deed in my bag. I thought of the blue notebook. It's a charming fantasy, I said. But none of that happens without the water rights. And they're not yours to pivot with. My aunt's jaw did a little tremble, then held. Come to the office at 3, she said. Bring your keys. At 3. I sat in the office on the squeaky chair and counted the dust on the picture frames. Shane leaned on the file cabinet. He had the nerve to be bored. My aunt opened a folder and set a piece of paper in front of me. It was an agreement, written in an unmistakably non-lawyer font, offering me $5,000 if I'd gift back my interests in the property known as the Spring, which I held in name only. There were gratitude phrases as if kindly giving me less than 1 month's profit were a favor. You'll never step foot here again once you sign, my aunt said. It's cleaner. For everyone. I'll need time, I said, because I wanted to see what they thought of silence. And I'll need to record this conversation for my notes. I took my phone out and set it on the table. Is that okay with you? I asked. Shane shrugged. Marla lifted her chin. I have nothing to hide, she said. They told me a story that afternoon about how they'd kept the place afloat, how vendors were friends and friends don't need everything written down, how my grandma was sentimental and had let inventory slip out the back door for years. They told me I was young and that I didn't understand what it cost to be a leader. They said it like a prayer. I asked 3 questions. Who applied for the Ciderfest grant in 2021? Who signed my name? And why did we set up 2 separate merchant accounts for the farm store last October? Marla went still for a blink. You were sick, she said. We handled what needed handling. She pushed the agreement closer. Don't be ungrateful. We're giving you a way to not embarrass yourself. I considered the edges of the paper raw from a dull cutting blade. I'll call Irene, I said. The color left my aunt's face in a ghostly tide. We'll be done talking to you, she said. If you bring outsiders into family matters, when you forged my name to steal money. You made it the county's matter, not just family, I said then. And it felt like putting a wedding dress in the mud. The room didn't get louder. It got brighter, like somebody had opened a window I didn't know could open. She reached for the paper. I slid it back, calmly. I'm taking this, I said. For my notes. That night I called Irene. I told your grandma not to trust anyone who uses the word pivot in a kitchen. Irene said. Her voice sounded like gravel and honey. She'd been a court clerk for 30 years. She knew where the bones were buried. And she knew which ones were still sharp. Come by in the morning. Bring coffee. I already know you're in trouble. My knee's been aching since Tuesday. I drove to Irene's little blue house and learned in an hour what school never taught me: what a list pendens is, how to file it, how county clerks roll their eyes when people think they can change a deed with stationery, and how the grant that funds Ciderfest requires an on-site audit if an anonymous tip mentions forged signatures. She wrote a list on a yellow legal pad while I drank coffee and tried not to fidget. Also, she said, file a FOIL request. We call it FOIL here, not FOIA, because New York is special. Ask for the grant application, vendor invoices, and any emails with your name. Most people don't realize public money makes public paper, so they'll have to. Give it to me, I said. They'll have to give it to anyone, even a raccoon with Wi-Fi. But go yourself. Smile like the Girl Scout you never were. I went from Irene's house to the county office and turned in my request. The woman behind the glass wore a sweater with a snowman on it, even though it was March. She stamped my form and said, 5 to 20 business days. I nodded like patience was a hobby I enjoyed. While I waited, I took the deed to the clerk's office. The clerk, who had a braid thicker than my wrist, flipped it over, checked the signatures, and said, I went to school with your mother. Then she stamped it like she was blessing a child. It's yours, she said, whatever that starts. It started anger. It started calls at midnight. You can't do this, my aunt said on the second night after I recorded her. You think water cares about a stamp? It cares about law? Which cares about stamps, I said. We'll talk at the hearing. What hearing? The one a judge has when people disagree about who owns the ground under their fight. She laughed like the idea was ridiculous. It wasn't. Irene had helped me file for a temporary order preventing any new encumbrance on the spring. The judge scheduled a hearing precisely 12 days from the eviction's deadline. The calendar, I noticed, was on my side. Not because of magic. Because Ruth had planned for my aunt's appetite. I kept working the orchard like it was mine. I pruned the northern row even though my arms ached. I cleaned the press with a hose because the smell of old apples makes your throat tighten if you leave it. I made a small batch of spiced pear syrup and sold it to the diner on Maple Street so I could pay the light bill. People started asking me what was going on. I told them the truth, carefully. I used the word pause instead of explosion. The employees who'd looked at their shoes started looking at me again. On the 5th day, a brown envelope came from the county. Inside were copies of everything I'd asked for. The grant application had my name on it, in a handwriting that was a decent mimic until you looked at the M, which I always looped and which they didn't know how to fake. The email thread showed my aunt and cousin CG'd on every step. A note from the grants officer, Miss Reeves, said, "Please confirm Lina is comfortable with in kind match from her personal account." My aunt had replied, pretending to be me, "Absolutely." I saw the timestamp, the day I had a fever and a doctor's note. I took the copies to Irene. We made 3 sets. We called a lawyer. He said the words fraud, civil, and criminal like he was choosing seasonings. "We'll go civil first," he said. "Criminal takes patience, and you need the house." I wasn't sure I could hold my composure in a courtroom. The last time I'd been in one was to watch my mother plead for diversion instead of a jail sentence after she took a car that wasn't hers and then forgot to return it. I watched the judge look at her like a child who had never seen snow look at a field of it. Mercy and confusion made the same face that day. I don't like courts. They smell like paper and old decisions. I showed up in a black dress and my grandmother's shoes anyway. I put the blue notebook in my bag. I tucked the Queen of Hearts into my sleeve and told myself that bluffing wasn't how we'd win. The courtroom was small and warm. The judge had a calendar of barns behind her and a mug with a cow on it. My aunt wore pearls and looked at me like she'd stepped on gum. Shane looked like the kind of man who had learned to put his head down when thunder started. "We're here on a petition regarding a temporary restraining order," the judge said. "Miss Moreno, round 1. Miss Moreno, round 2. God help me." She smiled, a thing I didn't expect. My lawyer went first. He laid it out like a story that had an unpleasant middle and a satisfying end. If fairness had its way. He showed the deed to the spring. He showed the FOIL documents with my signature flaring at the edges of a page I hadn't touched. He pointed to the grant clauses about audits and conflicts of interest. My aunt's lawyer stood and tried to make me a child. He said I was confused, emotional, unwell. He said words like estranged mother and at-risk temperament, and I felt my body try to shrink. My heart hammered. I remembered the night, years ago, when I hyperventilated in the grocery aisle because a woman dropped a glass jar and the crash sounded like men yelling and a hand slamming a door. I let the feeling pass through me. I didn't let it turn me into a ghost. "May I speak?" I asked the judge. She nodded. "I'm not well," I said. "I have grief, and it makes me clumsy sometimes. But I'm also a person who can read, and who knows my M from a fake one. I didn't sign those forms. I didn't authorize a second merchant account for the farm store that mysteriously routes to my aunt's personal Venmo. I didn't ask my cousin to take an inspector to dinner in exchange for a smooth report. But he did, and I have emails. I took my phone out, opened the recording from the meeting where Marla had said she had nothing to hide, and turned the screen to the judge. My aunt's lawyer objected. "This is improper," he said. "Recordings?" I asked their permission to record for my notes, I said. They said yes. "It's in the first 30 seconds. Would you like to hear it?" We listened to my aunt's voice explaining how sometimes you need to massage numbers and we'll do it right when the county does it right. Even her lawyer winced. The judge granted the temporary order. No asset transfers. No sales. No remodeling, she read, until we sort out who's holding what bag. Then she looked at my aunt. "And you, Miss Marino?" Need to get comfortable with the idea that a stamp matters. I'll see you in 2 weeks for the next hearing. In the meantime, Miss Reeves from the grant office is in my afternoon docket on another matter. I'll let her know to add you. It's time we open some windows. The next 2 weeks were oxygen and glass. The grant office sent an auditor and a woman who had a cardigan like a blanket and eyes like a hawk. They went through paper and numbers. They asked the farm store clerks about the second merchant account. Tara, who has a throat tattoo of a vine and had never been on time in her life, looked at me and chose to be brave. I was told to run the red card on the little green reader, she said, when the total was over 50. I asked why. Shane said, because it makes things faster. I didn't like it. I told Lina. She said she'd take care of it. That was the day my login stopped working. Marla changed tactics. She called me at midnight and cried. I never wanted this, she sobbed. Your grandmother put me in a corner. She loved you more. It isn't fair to expect me to hold this place up alone. It was the sort of confession people make when they think the worst thing they've done is ask for too much. Stop, I said. You forged my name. You cut my keys. You plan to sell water that isn't yours. There's no corner you didn't build. She was quiet. Then she said, soft. You'll lose friends for doing this. I'd rather lose the wrong friends than let my future be an apology. I said. The day we closed the first loop, the sky had the color of a bruise turning well. The grants office froze the next disbursement to Ciderfest. The event planner with the silk scarf called me and left the kind of message that starts with no hard feelings and ends with will not be using your services this year, per professional standards. I smiled and deleted it. The next hearing came. The judge tested both sides the way you push on a fence to see if it holds. She asked questions like, who benefits if the spring goes to a for-profit bottler? And why was an additional reader used only on weekends between noon and 3? Answers fell into the room like broken staples. I have one more thing, I said at the end. My lawyer gave me a look that said he trusted me and also that his heart had limits. I took the Queen of Hearts from my sleeve and set it on the rail. My grandmother always said we don't win by bluffing. We win by making them show their hands. So here's mine. I'm not selling the spring. I'm opening the press for community hours. And I'm partnering with the high school for job training. And I'm bottling a small batch of soda we can make without stealing our own future. If you give me the space, I'll make this into something that feeds us without anyone having to apologize for it. You're up next year for the youth internship grant. The judge said, don't disappoint me. She signed the order upholding my deed. She set a date for a full review of the fraud claims and referred the forged signature to the county DA with a look that made my aunt finally understand something the rest of us had been feeling for months. Consequences have a blood type. People think this is where it ends. Paper signed. Order issued. Villain wilted. But it continued in smaller ways long after the dramatic ones. We went back outside and the wind cut us like honesty. Shane came up to me and opened his mouth. I waited. For a moment. I saw the boy who used to throw apples at the barn to see if he could make them stick. He swallowed. He didn't apologize. He said, you made me look bad. You did that, I said, with your own hands. The grant office did their audit so slowly, I thought I'd become a fossil before they finished. They asked me for receipts from 3 winters ago. I found them in a shoebox, with a note from my grandmother in it that said, don't make your future self hate you. I wanted to hug her and also leave her a sticky note that said, sometimes I hate everyone. On a bright Thursday, the DA called. We're filing charges of forgery and theft over $5,000, he said. Like he was telling me which team made the playoffs. Your aunt's lawyer is asking about a plea. We're talking. Don't let them trade my name for convenience, I said. I surprised myself with how steady my voice was. If she pleads, it should be to something that matches what she did. He paused. You've thought about that, he said. I think about it when I try to sleep, I admitted. I think about it when I look at my grandmother's mixing bowl. I think about it when I count the staples in a letter. That weekend, I reopened the farm store. We sold donuts and jars of pear syrup and cider made from apples I'd pressed in. The mornings. I added a tip jar that said Legal Defense Fund as a joke, and people tipped until my hand shook. A man I didn't recognize bought a donut and said, "My father drank your grandmother's cider when he proposed to my mother. We want to be able to bring our daughter to do the same." It was the kind of thing that could have made me cry if I had spare water. My aunt pled to a lesser count, falsifying business records, and paid restitution. She avoided jail but not shame. I watched the hallway when she left court. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. Shane disappeared for a while, then resurfaced in a town an hour away, posting pictures of a gym and a dog and captions that said things like "hustle." The inspector who took dinner from him lost his job. Some people called me a snitch. I didn't correct them. Snitches tell on strangers. I told on someone who told me water didn't care about a stamp. There was one more loop to close. The event planner came back that fall. Scarf replaced with a sweater that cost as much as our farm truck's new starter. "We want to rent your barn in October," she said, like we hadn't met. 3 Saturdays. "Premium rate. Cider's a seasonal item," I said. "Brides are forever, but cider's honest." I gave her a list of what the orchard offers and where our line stops. "You can stop using our spring's name in your marketing," I added. "We're trademarking it." She blinked and didn't argue. Some people only understand fences when they can see them. I built a small tasting room with wood I sanded until I could feel my fingers in. The night, I put my grandmother's photograph on the shelf, and the Queen of Hearts next to it, facing out. People asked if the card was lucky. I said, "It's a reminder that luck is what you call it when the truth finally stands up." And on a Saturday in October, a line formed halfway down the drive. Children in sweaters pretended the hill was a mountain. A man stood behind me at the register and cried when he tasted the spiced soda I'd made from the spring water and the pears Tara had peeled. Slowly, one after the other, humming under her breath. He bought a case. He came back the next weekend and bought 2, and brought a friend, who bought 3. Word spread. We didn't get rich. We paid bills without the taste of panic. Some nights, after everyone leaves and the press quiets down like a sleeping animal, I sit on the steps and listen to the pipe murmur its own old story. That water existed before we put a pipe in. It will be here when I'm bones. But for a little while, it runs through something I saved. Do I think about revenge? Of course. I thought about it when I saw the eviction letter. I think about it when I see the mark in the wood where someone leaned too hard, on the counter with the elbow that had never had to do dishes. But revenge isn't a dish. It's a mirror. If you hold it up too long, you end up practicing your enemies' faces until all you can see are features you learned from them. I didn't feed the mirror. I fed the orchard. And still, I'll be honest, it felt good to watch the judge slides a piece of paper across a desk and see my aunt realize the future had stamps in it. You might be thinking, wouldn't it have been simpler to take the 5,000, move to the city, start fresh? Maybe. You might be right. There's a version of me in a city apartment who wears shoes that click and never has to explain why the apples don't look perfect after hail. She probably sleeps better. But there's also a version of me who gave up the ground that raised her because someone else's hunger made her smaller. I don't want to be her. We've started doing tours for the high school. Kids come in with their phones and their eyes, and I make them put their phones in a basket. "We'll give it back in an hour," I say. "No one's going to text you something worth more than the smell in here." They roll their eyes. Then they listen. Somewhere between the giant screw pressing the mash and the taste of the first sip, they see work turn into something else. It's not romance. It's control. It's knowing how to do something from start to finish. It's the opposite of forgery. It's not me putting a name somewhere my hand hasn't been. It's my hand, my arm, my back, my head, all in one piece. A month ago, a letter came addressed to me in my grandmother's handwriting. I stared at it like a ghost had found a pen. I opened it and found a card Ruth must have mailed the week she died, and the post office lost. "If they ever lock you out, check under the flower bin," she'd written. I laughed out loud. Under the flower bin was the emergency 20 and a note. "You didn't think I'd leave you with exactly 0 cash, did you?" I took the 20 down to the diner and bought pie for Irene. "People like us don't get everything we want," Irene said, fork in hand. "We get what we can carry." And sometimes we get to put down what was never ours. Like their shame. She pointed her fork at me. Make sure when you tell the story, you tell them it wasn't luck. It was work. And paper. And a stamp. So here I am, telling it. If you've listened this far, you already know the ending. We didn't just keep the spring. We kept our edges. We made a thing big enough to hold the anger and still set it down. Now I'm going to ask you what I asked myself over and over. Standing in a courtroom where the heat hisses and the judge's mug has a cow on it, if your family tried to erase you, would you take the money and go? Or would you hold the line and make them show their hands? And if my voice finds you on a night your house feels like a stranger and a paper with 3 staples tells you to leave, count them, breathe, and find your own blue notebook. The wood will tell the truth if you ask it the right way. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that justice can sound like water running steady under old boards. And if you want to hear how the first school tour went when a kid asked me why I didn't just burn the place down, stick around. That's another story.